We're back with some expert analysis from our political panel. Peggy Noonan is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and a CBS News contributor. Dan Balz is chief Washington correspondent for the Washington Post. Kim Strassel is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and one of our moderators at last night's debate. And Jamelle Bouie is chief political correspondent for Slate magazine and a CBS News political analyst. All right, all four of you, here we are on the stage where there was so much excitement last night. I don't want anyone calling anyone else a liar. Peggy, give us your reaction. What happened last night?
It was lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, it's what happens when a field, a uncoordinated field of 17 suddenly becomes 6 men who are really fighting and really want it. There were lots of sparks. To me, there were 2 headlines. One is Donald Trump didn't just have controversial or interesting remarks to say on the invasion of Iraq by looking at Jeb Bush and saying essentially your brother lied to get us in there, and also he was president during 9/11 and he should have made us safer. To me, he was getting into, or he was into, code pink territory, not Democratic Party territory, not moderate Republican, but kind of code pink territory. I'm not sure how that's going to play. I think we may be hearing a bit about it the next few days. Second thing was, I know many people think that Jeb Bush seemed strong in his sparks moments with Donald Trump, but I think too much Jeb Bush falls back on saying he's a 63-year-old man who's constantly saying, don't pick on my mom, don't pick on my pop, my father's the best father in the world. There's something odd and unbecoming about it. We know his parents, we know he loves them and why, that's wonderful. But in fact, Trump was talking about serious issues. I think he should have engaged on that.
Dan, what's your take?
I agree very much with what Peggy said. I mean, I thought this was a debate for the ages last night, and you must have felt the heat. You and Kim must have felt the heat standing a few feet away from
I didn't realize I need sunscreen.
It was remarkable, but I think to Peggy's point, Donald Trump is clearly not a pure conservative in any stretch of the imagination. And instead of trying to kind of sugarcoat that in some way that a politician might, he went in the opposite direction last night. In the short term, in this state where he has a very strong lead, it may not hurt him. In the longer term, as this field narrows, it could very well really be a big problem for him. And I also think that the more there was talk about Bush and the Bush family, as Peggy said, it is a problem for Jeb Bush, because we know even within the Republican Party, for as much affection as there is for the Bush family, there is resistance to more Bushes.
Another, Kim.
Yeah, I mean, I think South Carolina is going to be the test of whether or not Donald Trump can say or do anything, and if voters just keep supporting him. Because it wasn't just Iraq. I mean, on a lot of different things, on eminent domain, on the America's approach to Russia, on Social Security, whether you reform it, all these, he's to the left of a lot of the party. And if they just accept that, I think it means that there isn't really anything he can say or do that will ever turn off his supporters or a portion of the Republican electorate. The other thing I did like about last night is that all of the talk and the conversations and the fights, the lie, there was actually a lot of good discussion on policy debates up there about taxes, on entitlements, on foreign policy. And it was good because there were only 6 guys up on the stage. So I think it was a moment for a lot of voters to see a lot more about these candidates than they ever had.
Jamelle, what did you take away from it?
I just want to emphasize Peggy's point that this was a real brawl. I grew up as a kid watching a lot of professional wrestling, and it reminded me nothing so much as a cage match between a bunch of very able wrestlers. With that said, it's true that Donald Trump is much more to the left on a number of issues than a mainstream conservative would be. But my hunch is that Donald Trump is not so much speaking to Republican voters as he's speaking to the broader class of American voters. A lot of people agree with Donald Trump about Iraq. A lot of people agree with Donald Trump about President Bush's administration. And I have this hunch that much in the same way that Bernie Sanders is in a lot of ways not that much different from a mainstream Democrat, but he has the sort of the appeal of a not Democrat. You can still support President Obama, but not have to, pull the lever for a Democrat. I think Donald Trump is a not Republican. For a lot of Americans who may want a change from President Obama, but don't want to endorse things like the Iraq War, Donald Trump offers an option.
Dan, what happens if Trump does well here? Is that it? Off to the races, it's done? You mentioned it once he gets winnowed further, but how much of a big thing would it be if he won?
Well, so much depends on how rapidly the rest of the field winnows. I mean, as long as you have Kasich, Rubio, and Bush competing and continuing to go on, the more difficult it becomes for anybody to stop him. But, you know, I was talking to Terry Sullivan, who's Rubio's campaign manager, in the spin room last night, and their view is this is a delegate battle, as he talked to you in the interview this morning, and also basically a matter of survival, that you just keep going, and eventually others will fall away, and that when you get into the later stages of this campaign, when it is winner take all, that's the time when the anti-Trump faction becomes large enough to be able to carry those states.
Based on the aggression on the stage last night, they may literally fall away as one of them pushes them down. Kim, Ted Cruz made the case with Donald Trump on judges. This is I want to get your take on how important this is. He said basically he's going to nominate a liberal judge, and pay attention to that, voters. Do you think that has resonance?
Yeah, Justice Scalia's death, so unfortunate, but this is a moment that focuses all conservative minds. You know, as you were sitting there watching last night, it made everyone realize how important it was that the Republicans had won the Senate and now have the ability to do something about an Obama nomination. And it put the stakes up about how important it's going to be to win the White House next year for them. So that was Ted Cruz's message up on the stage, is this is now an issue. This shows you all why we're having this debate, why this is so important, and why we've got to win. The question is going to be whether or not Republicans can unite around one of these guys in the end, and they do understand those stakes, because it does help focus the mind.
Let's switch quickly then to Justice Scalia. Peggy, what's your sense? I mean, there's a fight now over this. How do you think it plays out?
Oh, yeah, the first thing is this is an epical moment, in a divided country, more or less, with a divided court, more or less, with a president leaving in 10 months, with a major presidential election coming up. What a moment to have the U.S. Senate consider, and a president consider, nominating a replacement for a man who was really a giant and who had so much meaning to conservatives in America, who took such comfort in his presence on the court. So to me, I think my headline is, wow, this election year is turning, this is like written by Alan Drury, this is Advise and Consent 2016. Right. It's going to be so dramatic. I am one of those who thinks I would love to see the president hold off on a nominee and say, I understand all the facts here. Let's go forward. You're electing the next president in America in just X months. The nominee will depend on the next president you pick. The court can get along 8-8 for a long time.
Jamelle, what do you think about, Kim mentioned the role that justices have in the conservative movement. What role do you think it plays in the Democratic race?
I think in the Democratic race, this is an opportunity for both Sanders and Hillary Clinton to sort of emphasize the stakes of this election. I think this intra-left divide between the two candidates has obscured the extent to which there are major and fundamental differences between the two parties. And President Obama yesterday said that he fully intends to nominate someone. Yeah. So I think, Peggy, your dream is going to have to...
He could change his
dream
mind.
Deferred.
He could say, wait.
We'll send him a transcript.
She's an optimist.
But my hunch is that whoever the president nominates, the Republicans may not even consider the nominee. And so we're going to have this 8, 9, 10-month period where I think both Democrats are really going to be hammering on this fact and using it to say, who wins November determines the future of civil rights, of voting rights, of climate, of this vast array of major issues. And so I think this might become the determinative issue of the election, and it may redound to Hillary Clinton's benefit, who is making her case on the basis of electability.
Dan, do you think it has a chance to play a role in any of the Senate races? I mean, there are about 5 or 6 Republicans in blue states, senators who are up in blue states. Do you think this matters in those states and therefore might matter to which party controls the Senate?
I think it very well could. I mean, we have seen really since Bush v. Gore the notion that the Supreme Court is not necessarily an impartial arbiter of American society. The court has been politicized, and I think even more so as a result of the death of Justice Scalia. I think we are headed toward a major debate about the role of the court and the significance of having control of the power, the levers that create the next Supreme Court. So I think it's big, not just in the presidential race, but also in the other races.
To add to that real quickly, I think depending on how the presidential race shapes out, that we may look back at the 2014 election as being hugely momentous, right? Republicans didn't just win a majority, they won a pretty comfortable majority. And if Democrats can't make that up this year, then the Supreme Court is sort of a very open question.
Kim, give me your thoughts on the Democratic race and where things stand now.
Well, Bernie Sanders is not going quietly into the South Carolina wilderness. I mean, everyone said he doesn't have a chance down here, but he came out very strong out of New Hampshire, and he's working very hard to get the minority vote down here. And he's actually, you know, as was mentioned earlier, there are a lot of South Carolinian voters who do not know him, but it is his opportunity, and he's not letting that pass.
Jamelle, you've been on the ground here doing some reporting. What have you found?
I found that, at least in this kind of rough area, that people are undecided, that precisely because Bernie Sanders is unknown and because there's a complicated relationship with Hillary Clinton and the Clintons in general. The 2008 primary was very divisive, and while a lot of people have been able to walk past that, others are still sort of like apprehensive. And so Sanders is being given space to make his case. I know that the Sanders campaign has hired staffers in rural parts of the state, and I think this could be very much underlooked. When people think about African Americans, they tend to think of them living in urban areas, but in South Carolina and throughout the South, there's large populations of rural Black Americans. And if Sanders is organizing in that world, then it really does, I think, change the game.
Hillary Clinton, Peggy, does well when she's up against a wall, is the argument. She's a fighter, and so now she's in a fight. Does that help her?
Well, you know what? I think the story here might be Sanders' momentum, but I don't know how big a story it is. Mrs. Clinton is winning where we are right now by 15 points, right? According to the latest battleground. That's a little smaller than what she used to be winning by. We are going to find out now if Bernie Sanders can take a chunk out of her support. We're going to figure out how much does she have to win by to look like a victor. I'm sure she'll work it really hard. This is important. I think South Carolina is where Mrs. Clinton tries to stop Bernie Sanders' momentum.
In the last 45 seconds, Dan, how nervous are they in the Clinton camp? There's reports of panic, and then there's, you know, more placid. Where does it really stand?
John, I talked to 4 governors on Friday, all of whom support Hillary Clinton for president, and I was actually surprised the degree to which they still see her on a path to win the nomination. They know that she has, you know, got beaten badly in New Hampshire. They know that the Sanders message has taken hold. They know that she has to make some course corrections, but they also believe that as we move farther into the calendar, it's going to be advantageous for her. I don't know whether they are being optimistic because they feel they need to be, or whether they genuinely believe that.
All right. Well, we'll see how it all turns out. Thanks to all of you for joining us here. And thanks for you, all of you out there. We'll be right back.